Here at the Bob and Sheri Show, we are big supporters of all of our friends in the stand-up comedy industry, and we really love to see someone chase their dream, even if it means throwing away like a job with health insurance. Joining us next is comedian Pat McGann.
We always have an odd one in the crowd.
So it's kind of odd.
Decidedly odd.
Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd?
No, it doesn't strike me as a little bit odd.
It's the Bob and Sheri Oddcast, the stuff we wouldn't, couldn't, or shouldn't do on the regular show. Now, here's the Oddcast.
It's tough being married with kids, right? But no one tells us. We just line up and do it. You know how many bachelor parties I was at? They brought a stripper? That's stupid. They should bring out a guest speaker. When's mom gonna be home? That's a big one I get. Don't you think I'm wondering the same thing? How about this? When I start paying attention to you, she's close. We got stuff from the Bible hanging up in our house. We're Catholic. We don't even do the Bible. We got Old Testament sayings. Perhaps this is the moment you were created for. She hung that up in our bathroom. Really? This is what I was created for? To take a and scroll Twitter?
Pat McGann joins us right now. And Pat McGann is one of my favorite kind of people because he had a realization that his boring, serious grown-up life was not working for him. So he decided to chase his dream of stand-up comedy. Well done, Pat. Well done.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Sheri. Thank you very much.
So Pat, you were 31 years old when you said, I think that's what I want to do, stand-up comedy. That is unusual.
Yeah, I was a little bit the late bloomer, I guess. I was, in sales and had like a regular job, but I was always kind of pulled towards writing, pulled towards funny things, but I just never was on stage. That was what I had to overcome. So once I started hitting some open mics, and kind of been doing it ever since.
What is that like going up the first 2 or 3 times with an open mic situation? You don't know. I mean, the audience is right in front of you, right? It seems to me like a really, difficult, scary thing to do. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a little bit intimidating. And, when you have a light in your eye and you're on stage, you can't really see much in the audience. And I wasn't really used to that. So that took some getting used to. Yeah. But I don't know, if you've ever been to an open mic, they are wonderfully terrible. Like there's some really rough stuff you got to sit through. So that kind of gives you a little bit of confidence. Like, hey, I can go up there if these people are doing that. And, it's a really good environment. And comedy scenes, every city, not every city, but a lot of cities have a comedy scene, and they're pretty supportive overall. So it was kind of a new world I was entering, and I really do love it.
So Chicago, you still live in Chicago. You were brought up in Chicago. Is there something about Chicago that sort of helped to mold your style of comedy? It's a wonderful city. My daughter lived there 5 years.
Yeah, it's a great city. And you know what? I think there is a sense of humor that kind of develops in the Midwest. And also we have to go through winters. So people that suffer through winters, I think that kind of, shapes your sense of humor and gathering and getting together, telling stories. And, I grew up here. So this is just where I've always lived. And all the people that I grew up with seem to be very funny, and a sense of humor was like a big part of a personality. So I never really thought of it like, this is, something that I should be doing. I just thought everybody around that I grew up with was kind of funny and
was funny. Yeah.
So Pat, let me ask you this now, when you had this epiphany and you were like, you know what? I'm going to go around one time and I'm going to chase my dream and I'm going to do what I want. And I am going to become a stand-up comedian. Were you a married dude when you made that decision, Pat? And how did that go over?
So I was actually just starting to date the mother of my children, and I was married up until a year ago. So I was married for about 12 years, and she was very supportive of me as I was getting going. But it was so I was dating but not married.
And how have you have 3 kids? How have the children come into play with your act? I just love the line that you want to know when I'm paying more attention to you? When your mother is close. I mean, any guy really identifies with that. How have kids been a part of your act over the years?
I talk a lot about my kids because, life is like so kid centered now. Like I thought it was gonna be easy being a parent. I watched my parents like, what do I gotta do? Hide a key? I can hide a key. I didn't know I was gonna have to like validate their feelings. Because now kids have feelings, like plural. I had a feeling when I was a kid. I had a feeling I should keep my mouth shut. Now it's like now they got sports careers. So I talk a lot about that. My son's playing hockey, which he had to try out for. You know what the tryout was? Can you come up with $2,500? That was the tryout.
And do you have a parent willing to get you to a rink at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They always have these tournaments. Like we have a game at 6 a.m. If we win, we play again at 5 p.m. It's like, oh, okay, so we're rooting against you. We're gonna root against you. Okay.
My nephew was a hockey kid, Pat, and there is no sacrifice or commitment like a hockey parent's sacrifice and commitment, because ice skating rinks at 6 o'clock in the morning are cold, desperate, miserable places. Tournaments are always out of town. I mean, you live in Chicago, you live in hockey territory, but I know you ain't playing tournaments anywhere near your house. And every single aspect of it costs more money than anything. I don't understand how hockey parents do it. I just don't.
Yes, it is not cheap. And like you said, you always got to be at the rink. Like my son's got to be there an hour early for the game. That's what he's telling me. He's like, are we catching a flight? Or are you playing other third graders? So he's like telling me, coach said I got to be there. It's like, do you tell your coach you don't have a car? Do you tell your coach you were born in 2014?
Are you the kind of hockey dad that my brother was, where you are like actively encouraging mayhem and violence on the ice? Or are you sane?
I think I'm maybe a little more sane. I just, I got to admit, sometimes I can't get to the games because I'm on the road. But when I'm at the games, I'm pretty chill. I do enjoy watching my son play, and I do want to be supportive of it. I also love to make fun of it because some of the parents are they're crazy about it. And they're, it's a great sport. Just the imbalance of it all just seems like absurd to me. Cause I grew up playing sports, I didn't have my own, like my other guy playing baseball. He's got his own equipment, his own bat. It's like, why have you've seen 4 good pitches all year. Why is your bat $390? And why can't you hand it to the next kid when you're done striking out with it?
This was like Bob's experience of Little League. You didn't have special shoes or gear. You showed up, you played for like Chips Plumbing or whatever. And then you went home, and maybe your parents showed up for one game. Now it's like mini major league when you get out there with kids.
It's all travel ball now. It's travel sports all the way around. It doesn't matter what sport you're in. There's a travel team for it. And it's very expensive, and you've got to be out of town every weekend. You're going to tournaments all over the place. And I mean, it is a huge business. It's huge. I mean,
that's what it is. It's just such a money grab. It's like, why are you going? You got teams going to Connecticut. You're in 4th grade. You're going from Chicago to like where are you going? You could go around the block and get your ass kicked. Why are we flying?
That's so true.
Vermont?
That's so true. One of my kids went to Houston, Texas. I mean, it's so expensive. The idea of my old man paying about $1,000, $1,200 for one weekend for me to play for the Olsen Plumbers does not compute in my mind.
No, and the dads are all over the top too. They got the equipment. They got the team equipment bag with the, embroidered name. My coach had a bag he brought back from Vietnam. That was our equipment bag.
Yeah.
We had a big green duffel.
You got to have the private tutor. It's got to be I have a guy I worked with at one point. He had private lessons twice a week. And sure enough, I mean, he got into a college, and then they were going to take him to another college, and we're going to give him a scholarship. But then they got his grades, and they go, "We can't take you. I mean, you're dumb." And I told my buddy, I said, did you ever think when you was taking him to them batting lessons, maybe go to a tutor about some math or something? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he couldn't go any further because he had the talent, but he was just dumb. So, I mean, I'm sorry.
We are talking with Pat McGann right now, and I want to ask you, we do this with comedians that have really hit, and you certainly really have hit. What was it like the first time you were on a Letterman show or a Colbert show? Very first time, national audience, and obviously a couple of heavy hitters there in the comedy world. What was it like moments before you walked on? How did you feel?
Oh, that's a great question because it's kind of like a moment I will never forget was the Letterman experience because I grew up watching David Letterman and it was like my big goal to. So I was at that at Sullivan Theater and I was nervous, like I had never done anything like that before. And Biff Henderson, you guys remember Biff? He had like the headset on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're backstage and he's like, "Hey, just relax." He's like, "Just remember, this is where the Beatles made their debut when they came to America." Elvis performed here. Like, kind of like a reverse. Like, okay, like it made me more nervous, but also like, hey, I'm not them. I'm not not that big of a moment, And I did have like a out of body experience when I did that. The first Letterman, I kind of forgot one of my jokes too. And I thought like, oh my gosh, am I going to derail this entire set? Because it's just a different feeling. It's like a little bit of a detached experience, but I could hear David Letterman like to my left because on TV, it looks like you're further apart, but you're pretty close. And I could hear him laugh at a couple of jokes that kind of relaxed me a little bit. And also just the fact that it's in a theater and not a studio is pretty good for the performer because it feels like you're at a show, versus some of these TV studios that can feel pretty removed and the studio audience might not be like right with you, right there in front of you.
Right. Right.
So it was a really great experience, but also like a blur.
So you felt it was like an out of body experience, like you were as you were doing the bits. You were watching yourself mentally do it. Is that what it was like?
Yeah, I guess it's like just a feeling I kind of get where I'm like, I'm saying the things, but I'm almost like not in the moment. I'm more like thinking what's next and how is this going? And is this almost over? Like, you're just kind of more self-aware. You put pressure on yourself, I think. But then I actually got to do it a second time and it was like, just that much more comfortable because the first time you're there, you don't know what to expect. And one of the guests was Kevin Bacon. And there was another time first time I did Stephen Colbert, like Carol Burnett was there, Sean Astin. So it's always like kind of cool to see who else is on the show.
Yeah.
It's just a whole experience, but that was a highlight of my career. I'll never forget the Letterman stuff.
Did you have any family members that thought you were crazy going into comedy, and have you pushed it in their face since then, especially being on with, say, Carol Burnett?
Yes, I just hung up with my parents this morning, and every morning I call them, and I'm like, I told you I could do it. You didn't believe me. No,
I bet when they saw what your parents saw you with Carol Burnett as an example again, their chest must have puffed up a little bit. They must have called some friends.
Yeah. No, I think that my family's been very supportive. And this thing, my career kind of like was gradual, it happens bit by bit. And I think they were a little bit surprised when I wanted to start, because I didn't have like a theater or performing background. But also they've been very supportive. They love to come to shows. So it's like, I felt their support, but I think they're maybe surprised that it became like a full-time existence, especially like being from Chicago. Like I didn't move to New York or LA. So I think that was a good thing too. It kept me very grounded and didn't seem like it was taking over my life,
We had on Dan Aykroyd once, and we were talking to him about comedy in Canada versus comedy in the United States. And he said, I was close, and I was in Chicago a lot, so I got a little bit of that kind of edgy, American thing, but then there's a softer Canadian way, and I'm kind of a blend between the two. Is there a slightly softer difference in Chicago comedy growing up in Chicago than, say, Boston and New York?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not really sure if it's because a lot of the comedians in Chicago, it's made up of people from all over. And it's really like the last place you would go. Like you might leave Cleveland, you might not go right to New York or LA. You might leave Cleveland and come to Chicago. You might come from Detroit. So it's a great scene. It's very vibrant, and we have a very strong improv scene. And that is what Chicago's known for. When you say you're a comic from Chicago, everyone's like, "Oh, Second City," and that is great. And it's a great, breeding ground for talent. But it does put a chip on your shoulder for the stand-ups, which is kind of good to have because the stand-up scene is maybe thought of secondly to the improv. But you also get that influence. Zany's Comedy Club, where I worked a ton, that was like my home club, is right down, like just a few doors down from Second City. And you would see, improv actors and, so you get influenced by that too, which is good because there is an improv element to stand up. I think that there's a little bit of attitude in Chicago, a lot of pride in it, but also, like I was saying earlier, supportive too. And, we realize that New York and LA are, maybe a little bit bigger stand-up scene. So we got to deal with that.
Growing up, what was the influence? I was just in Massachusetts, and the Norman Rockwell Museum has the history of Mad Magazine drawings, and Mad Magazine meant a lot to me as a kid, and may have influenced what I do here. Who was it that influenced you in Chicago growing up? Who was a comedian?
I just want to say my parents brought me to that Norman Rockwell Museum when I was a kid. It's so cool. I remember being
Isn't
there.
it?
And I also enjoyed Mad Magazine. I mean, that was the thing. Like I consumed everything that was funny. I loved, Mad Magazine. I loved Saturday Night Live. My parents would watch Letterman and Johnny Carson, and they often had stand-ups on. I remember like Gary Shandling stubbing in for Johnny Carson. And I remember my parents coming back from New York and talking about Jerry Seinfeld. My mom was a huge Seinfeld fan. So I was always watching comedy. And then with my friends, sneaking away to watch Eddie Murphy Delirious. And he was a guy that I saw on Saturday Night Live, but I didn't really understand like that he also did this stand-up thing. And just watching sitcoms and I don't know, like everything funny I just really enjoyed because I saw people connecting over it. I heard people repeating jokes and, using humor to bond and to get through, I grew up in an Irish Catholic area, so it's very much a part of our culture. A ton of influences. And now, being in it and working with comics, your influences start to change a little bit. And sometimes you're influenced by your peers. Once you start doing this thing, you really open up to seeing a whole lot of different ways of approaching it. So that's been very cool.
How did the church and being Irish influence you on stage in your act, if at all?
I think storytelling and, there are a ton of people that can relate to being Catholic, right? So I think all these shared experiences, things that I've thought about, like I used to do a lot of jokes about growing up Catholic, holding hands during the prayers. Like I've never been one of those people that like, you ever see the people that try and hold your hand? Like, it's like, can you calm down, relax? Like it's flu season.
Yes.
Or just how strict they were. Like, now my kids, they go to Catholic school and they can grow their hair out now. They're very shaggy. They got,
right.
And we couldn't have long hair when I was a kid. They bring you to the front of class. It's like, really? My hair can't be as long as this guy? You're like pointing to the crucifix. Like, why can't my hair be as long as him? Like, is that why he's up there?
Catholic school now is so different from Catholic school back when you were a kid. Because, like, I have friends whose kids are in Catholic school. I went to Catholic school. And these kids are not required to wear knee socks in the dead of winter. Like it's a completely different, no one hits them or pulls their hair. It's a completely different environment than the one you went to school in. Completely. It's soft.
Oh yeah, there's no one really running it anymore, you know? All the nuns are gone. The priests are kind of like no one's really listening to them. So I'm not really sure who's my kids the other day were like, they said if I bring in $5, I can wear sweatpants. Like, is that even legal?
What?
That's like it's like an open racket, you know? Yeah, it's
Hey, they're
completely
learning,
different
though.
now.
They're learning the ways of the world.
When I was in Catholic school, Pat, if we we would occasionally get a casual day where you could wear like your regular clothes instead of your uniform. And my grandparents would just shake their head and say, Vatican II ruined everything. If they came back to life now and saw Catholic school where you don't have furious, exhausted nuns for teachers, they wouldn't understand what they were paying tuition for. It is just nowhere near the same.
Yeah, it's completely different. But my kids seem to be enjoying it too. You know, they go to or my daughter now is altar serving, which is
yeah.
That's actually fun.
Unheard of. Yeah.
Yeah.
An altar girl, unheard of.
We have a friend who is a country music performer, and he is just a great guy. And he said that the scariest thing that his name is Jimmy Wayne, the scariest thing that he ever encountered as a performer was playing Madison Square Garden for a variety of reasons. And you played sold-out shows there. Tell us about what it's like at Madison Square Garden, which is probably the premier event in place to play in the United States.
Well, no doubt. I mean, that arena is like the most famous arena. That only came together because of Sebastian Maniscalco. You know, I've had a really fortunate piece of my career has been opening for Sebastian. I met him in Chicago at Zanies, and he took me on the road with him. This goes back like 5-6 years, and I'm still with him. We just kicked off another tour, his tour, the It Ain't Right tour, and we're going to be back at MSG in September. So I cannot wait. The first time I did it was, you talk about out of body experiences, and I'm, a big basketball fan. So I grew up watching Jordan. Like I grew up with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. That was my childhood. And I used to love watching him go into Madison Square Garden and play the Knicks. Like that was always a huge night. So that's what I was thinking when I went there. And we got there kind of early. Got to the arena. I was able to like walk around the concourse, take in the history of it. I'm also pretty big into history. I majored in history at school, and I'm familiar enough with all the great things that have happened at MSG. So to be there and get to perform was very cool. And it was something that I'll never forget. And just to see Sebastian like selling it out. And then like there were nights that we did 2 shows. So you're like you're flipping the garden. You do like a 7 o'clock show, and then they bring in another 18,000 people to do the second show. Pretty crazy.
Is it really hard to play a room that big? I mean, you're used to clubs and arenas of a certain size. 18,000 people how do you hit the guy in the back row?
Yeah, it is different. The arena comedy it's really been helped by these screens. So just having the screens to connect with everyone, but also, just light and sound has gotten so much better. So it is different. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit different of a connection and maybe a little bit of a delay, like hearing the feedback from the audience, but you're in the round. That's another difference. You're walking in a circle versus everyone in front of you, but it also works. And it's different, but it can be like really incredible as well. But I think without the screens, it would be pretty difficult to connect with all those people. But yeah, it's been very cool to be able to do that.
Well, congratulations on all of this. Where can people go to find out more about you?
I post a ton on Instagram. I got a lot of new material on there, a bunch of clips at McGann, Pat. And then my website, patmcganncomedy.com. Like I said, I'm going to be with Sebastian a lot this year, but I do have some shows coming up solo shows as well. And all that is on my website.
Well, Pat, congratulations on how things turned out. 31 is not early to start, but boy, it sure worked for you. Take care of yourself, and thank you very much for being with us.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks so much.
Hey, if you want to check out a show with Pat McGann and his buddy Sebastian Maniscalco, you can get your dates and tickets at patmcganncomedy.com. That's PATMCGANN comedy.com. And you know our website is bobandsheri.com. And we appreciate you listening to the Oddcast because you're the reason that we're doing it in the first place. We'll see you next week.